Timeout on the field.
Hey, this is Heath, and Andrew and myself, while coming back from a meeting tonight, noticed that the gas tank was getting low and pulled over to refuel before finishing up and heading back home. And we began to talk about how that applies spiritually to our lives. When our tank gets empty and it gets low, what are we going to do about it? And I'd like to just for a moment mention a few things that we can do spiritually, just like we do when we're on a road trip or when our tank in our car begins to run low on gas. Number one, you got to know where to get your gas from. As we was driving down 85, we had to find a gas station. We wasn't sure exactly where we could get one. And the other thing that you got to do, especially in 2012, is find somewhere that's got low fuel cost. With gas at $4 a gallon in most places, you got to really know where to get it from, so that it doesn't cost you more than you can pay. Now, I begin to think spiritually in our lives. We get filled up maybe at a great church service on a Sunday, or go to a revival meeting and get really filled up with God. But then after just a few days of the workplace, the schoolhouse, all these different places that we go that's full of the world and sin, it begins to pull us down, and things in our life happen that's not good, and depression and things hit us. And when those things happen, we begin to lose a little bit of what God's put in us. And before we know it, just like a car, as we go mile after mile down the road, we get empty. And then we begin to try to operate in our emptiness. Now this car here, as each one of us know, we can't run on empty. It's going to wind up broke down on the side of the road. And I wonder how many people's broke down in their Christian life, still trying to operate something that doesn't have the fuel in it, what drives the system. God's so much the same way. He wants to keep putting that gas back in you. Ephesians 5:18 says, "Be ye filled with the Spirit." That word filled there, what it means is a continual filling. It's not a one-time thing. Now, when you were saved, the Holy Spirit of God came into the inside of your life. That is true. But there's a daily outpouring of Him, a daily submission on our half, giving ourselves to Him, that will cause that filling of the Spirit to keep reoccurring in our life. Just as we got to stop, most of us, at least once a week and fill up with gas, spiritually we've got to be willing to take some time out. What can we do? You've got to pray. You got to study. You got to spend time with God. And that way, when the things in this world and the mile after mile that you go in this journey begins to wear you out, begins to pull that spiritual indwelling out of you, and you begin to run low in your tank, you can get filled back up. God's gas station is time alone with Him. That's the only way you're going to find that gas that you need for your life. Now here we are at the gas station, and what do we got to do if I'm going to get gas? Well, I've already swiped my card. I've already put my payment in. That's us spending time with God. That's us submitting ourselves, getting on our knees, crying out to God, asking God to touch our lives. That's the same thing I did by swiping my card. What's the second thing? I've got to put this nozzle here in the van. Before I can put gas in it, I've got to get that nozzle hooked up. Let me ask you this question. What are you hooked up to tonight? If you ain't hooked up with Christ, if you don't have that personal relationship, if there's sin, if there's lack of fellowship and romancing with Christ, you're not hooked in. If you're not hooked in, if you're not faithful to church, if you don't have a Bible that you're continually reading, there's no way you can get that gas. There's no chamber for it to flow through. You've got to be hooked in. What's the last thing you got to do? You got to be willing to let that gas flow into your car, just like I'm doing right now. And as you head out today and you go to your workplace or to school, I want to challenge you to get hooked up. I want to challenge you to allow that nozzle to be flowing freely in your life. Don't let anything hinder you from that time alone with God where you can be filled up. Let that Ephesians 5:18 be something that happens every day of your life, and allow your life in these last days to count for Christ. Thank you so much for watching.
Timeout on the field.